So with the arrival of Keith one-time Thurman and the resurfacing of CHARLO, the number of matchups that can be made at the 154-pound division is something that has to be highlighted and that cannot go unnoticed. I mean, with fighters like Vergil Ortiz Jr. and Sander Zayas somewhat lurking in the shadows, when you really consider how stacked and how hot this division can and should be, it's definitely something for any hardcore fans to be excited about. When you have guys like Keith Thurman coming back from injuries and looking nothing short of excellent in his super welterweight debut, it gets hard to shy away from wanting to see him square off against one of the more prominent names, being that Brock Jarvis just wasn't on his level, or on that level in general. Now, because Thurman was supposed to face Tim Tszyu a year ago in a bout that never happened due to Thurman getting injured yet again, the ideal opponent for a newbie like Thurman would still be Tim Tszyu, considering the fact that Tim suffered his first defeat in a bloody mess against last-minute replacement Sebastian Fundora, and then recently got dismantled by Murtazali this past October. Now, with Tszyu having a bout against Joey Spencer this upcoming April, the verdict is still out. However, with all the rumors that Errol Spence Jr. will be making an appearance at the 154-pound division, the biggest marquee matchup for Keith Thurman would be Spence, being that it's basically the fight that never happened. Anyone who's anyone knows that once upon a time, Thurman vs. Spence was one of the hottest matchups that could be made at the 147-pound division. Like, that matchup was real life pay-per-view worthy just a few years ago, and to what shouldn't even be a surprise, that matchup is in high demand even more so now than ever, for the simple fact that Thurman's recent inactivity in general lines up well with a guy like Errol Spence, who hasn't had a fight since his annihilation at the hands of Terence Crawford in 2023. It's almost a fair trade when you pair Thurman and Spence up at this point of their careers. Here's the thing though, after Thurman's most recent win against Brock Jarvis, he said he was open to facing anybody at 154, but singled out names like Tim Tszyu, Errol Spence Jr., and Jermell Iron Man Charlo. So for somebody like me who likes to try and read between the lines, you could understand why I would be optimistic to see a fight between Keith Thurman and Jermell Charlo. I mean, Jermell Charlo himself has been inactive since his 2023 bout against Canelo Alvarez, and although many people would like to write him off, I'm not of the same notion. I believe that Charlo's still as big as a threat as he was before his fight with Canelo, especially at 154. Let's not forget, bruh, Jermell Charlo is the one and only ever super welterweight undisputed champion of the 4-belt era, and only lost that label due to being stripped when moving up to face Canelo Alvarez. Also, losing to Canelo at this point is like losing to Floyd Mayweather, man. You know, Canelo might be beatable and he might not be undefeated, but the hard truth is, no matter how much motherfuckers try to hate on Canelo, a lot of dudes ain't just gonna beat Canelo Alvarez, and that's just what it is. So there's nothing that can be held against Jermell for losing that fight and taking a much needed break, especially considering the fact that he was already battling a hand injury long before his bout with Canelo. Add all of that in with the fact that Mel is not only back in the gym, but that he recently posted a cryptic message to everyone at super welterweight, and you can kind of get an idea of where I'm going with this. What stands out to me the most is when he says, "This 154 life ain't for everybody." That right there was a clear indication that he was not only sending out a warning, but that the message was sent out for someone particular. Now, I doubt he's talking about Sebastian Fundora, who has been at the division for a while and is basically the man at said weight class. It can't be Vergil Ortiz because he's been there. We know guys like Boachuk, Murtazaliev, and Madrimov ain't ducking no smoke. So to me, that leaves it for two guys. The first guy would be Keith one-time Thurman, who again just debuted at that weight class and called Mel's name right after his victory. And two, come on, man. We know the verbal and mental warfare between Jermell Charlo and Bud Crawford has been going on for a minute now, and since Bud will be moving up to 168, it only makes sense why Charlo, like everyone else, could be skeptical on what Crawford's future endeavors are after facing Canelo in September. Now, would it make sense to troll a guy moving up to 168 to face the current face of boxing the same way you did? Maybe not. However, I'm sure Jermell, like Terence Crawford, knows that they are pretty much each other's next big money fight, especially if Crawford loses to Canelo, which is probably why Bud recently confirmed that he's not eyeing a retirement after his fight with Canelo and is looking forward to coming back down to 154 to not only face Sebastian Fundora or any reigning champion, but that he would actually like to save Jermell Charlo for last, given the history of their back and forth. Yes, Terence Crawford said that, for those who don't already know. I know one thing, if Bud does come back down to 154 like he says, there may even be a chance that we see him versus Keith Thurman in another 147-pound matchup that we never got to see. The rematch with Spence at 154 is probably something a lot of casuals and Big Fish fanboys might be clinging to, and even though I'm not crazy about a Crawford versus Spence rematch, I can even see that making all the more sense now after Crawford's recent comments about Errol Spence's resume. I know a lot of folks are pissed off at Crawford for his recent comments about Spence not being Hall of Fame worthy, and even though many can make the case that Bud doesn't have any room to talk about resumes, in my humble honest opinion, as much as it might even hurt me to say, I agree with Crawford, man. Spence wasn't around long enough and doesn't really have the accolades to be a Hall of Famer. It's just the truth. Now, I will say Spence does have a really good resume for his tenure at 147, but that's about it. He unified, but he didn't get undisputed, and the only weight class he ever fought at was 147. As to where Crawford is two-time undisputed and has been a champion in 4 different weight classes, regardless of his resume. Either way, it would be interesting to see if CHARLO takes those comments as personal as he claimed to have took Crawford's beat down to Spence, or if Spence himself has something to say about it. I guess it's like they say, time will tell, but one thing's for sure, the clock is ticking. Pop off.